All right, check, Mike. You guys hear us okay? This is exciting. You guys excited?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So today, I am thrilled to be in conversation with these three incredible young leaders, all of whom are from the Aspen Challenge. They are alumni from there. Are you all familiar with the Aspen Challenge? Yeah? If not, you should learn more about it. It's an amazing organization. The Aspen Challenge really is a youth leadership program that provides inspirational tools and a platform for young people to design solutions for some of the most critical problems that humanity is facing. And so since we are on a short amount of time, I would love for you to kind of share a little bit about yourselves in the questions as we position them. It'll give an opportunity for us to learn more about your work, but also really learn more about you and how that challenge has really supported your work. So first off, I'm going to jump to Gianna. So Gianna, you chose to focus on climate literacy, and since your experience with the challenge, you've really committed to becoming an activist for climate justice. Can you tell us a little bit about the solution you developed and kind of what that process was like when you were getting into it?
Yeah, of course. So I'm from Miami, Florida. I did the Aspen Challenge back in 2020, 2021, in my senior year of high school, and we were challenged with not only improving climate literacy in my community, but also majorly reducing a greenhouse gas emitter like sector. And so what we did was we developed a two-pronged solution to this issue. First, we partnered with a local nonprofit to improve climate literacy at my school through a program that gave climate 101s to students so they could understand this issue and start to delve into it because it's not included in our state standards. And then we had a podcast where we interviewed community leaders in climate justice, but also in all the intersections involved to really show students their opportunity to make a difference. We also had an actionable component where we started a composting program in our school with a micro grant from a great nonprofit, the Children's Trust in Miami-Dade County, and also develop the resources for other schools to do the same. We passed Meatless Mondays in our school to offer, our sector was food waste emissions, I should preface, and we started that Meatless Mondays program, and it was eventually adopted by our district, which is the fourth largest school district in the nation. So highlighting both the education and the action.
That's amazing. It sounds like you've done this on many fronts as you thought about kind of this work. And as we were discussing earlier, you're also coming from like a family of educators. So just this idea of being able to really learn and put these things into practice, I think is amazing. Now that you've become more involved in climate activism, do you really feel that your voice has been heard from those that are in power, that really have kind of a lot of say in the direction of how this work goes? Do you feel like you actually had a seat at the table in these conversations?
I think for me, and this also, I understand I come from a very Floridian perspective a lot of the time. And so for me, it always felt like in Florida that we weren't even at the start of the beginning to start about the intersection of climate justice, because understanding that this is not an issue that could happen in isolation from housing justice, racial justice, any other issue when it comes to social movements. And so for a lot of the time in my organizing experience, it felt like we weren't even having the conversation to invite young people to the table, and especially not those feeling most burdened the impact of climate change, not low-income communities, communities of color, frontline communities. And like what I remember most, like a foundational experience in my time organizing in Miami, was we gave public comment all the time, because every single budget season there was always like a slash to climate resilience. And so I remember in one of my public comment deliveries are given like 2 minutes to just, mind you, bear, like knowing the impact, the climate grief I felt, the like frustration of political inaction. And I talked about how after Hurricane Irma, we had to evacuate my house. It was a hurricane that hit in 2017, and my house was said to be like 8 feet underwater.
Yeah.
And so my mom, my grandma, my entire family stuffed into a car and just drove up the Florida Panhandle with no region to go. My mom hadn't budgeted for the expense of having to evacuate our home. I remember like putting my heart out there and receiving, half the commissioners weren't there.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even a conversation being had, nor the intricacies of like, I lived in a predominantly like Latino community, a Latin community in Miami. So like not even delving in because the stakeholders weren't even at the table.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like, and this is actually a great opportunity to kind of really talk into some of the work that, Jonathan, you've been doing as well. Just one, knowing that there's a conversation to be had, and then being given the space to be there, and a space that actually is going to provide real voice opportunity to actually listen, hear, and do something about it, especially representing your community. Now, Jonathan, You have been working essentially with a team that's really looked to imagine and implement a project in your community of New Orleans called Love in Action, right? So how does this represent your community, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about what that work is and why you did it?
Okay. Well, as far as the work, it's just to highlight the reality of the youth in my community because often the narrative that's pushed is that the youth are the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So by what we did was we went to like it's like an alternative middle school,
Okay.
and we exposed the kids to some new things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like we exposed them to opportunities with programs. We went out there, we did activities with them. We played basketball and stuff, and got to know them a little bit. And I feel like in New Orleans, people don't do that enough. They don't take the time to go out and try to learn the youth. They automatically judge them and try to limit them in a way, you know what I'm saying? Because they already have a certain perspective on what New Orleans youth are.
Sure, yeah, the youth aren't this monolithic idea that, oh, they're youth, so they must all be like this.
Right.
And it sounds like if you want to support a community, you should really do what the work of being a part of that community and
Right.
really understanding their needs. So in this experience, as you were kind of going across New Orleans in these communities, uh, obviously, like it sounds like you're a youth in this work, and you're being provided these opportunities to come into this work, and there's a lot of adults that are there to try and help you through it. Do you feel like in that work that this community supported those actions and those interests, or do you feel like there are things that we should consider when providing this space for youth to speak up and support? Was there something that was missing? What was your experience with that?
I feel like people, like the adults, wanted to help me. You know what I'm saying? Like they tried to put in the work to put out the message, and the message was received, but I don't feel like it got enough acknowledgement
Yeah.
because I still see the same perspective in the adults in my city. You know what I'm saying? Like I still see people condemning the youth.
Yeah.
Like the kids in my city, they can't even go to the movie theater without a person over 21 because they don't trust the youth
Yeah.
because everybody believes that they are the problem.
Yeah, so if we want to really hear from youth and do well by them, we need to be able to really show them real empowerment through practice and through that experience. And it sounds like we also encourage our youth voices to speak up and be a big part. And that's something that you've been doing, Ariana, in your work especially, is to elevate disenfranchised voices and help create change. Working through a social service organization that you're a part of right now, you've done a lot of this organizing and speaking out on behalf of youth and as a youth yourself. This was part of what your Aspen Challenge project was all about. In that, a lot happens in that when you're very passionate about that perspective and what you want to bring to the table. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience, especially with nonviolent protesting, with something that we know that our youth are very involved with and are a big part of, and even to the point where you're so involved and committed that at one point you were even arrested because of your beliefs around this work. Can you just walk us through a little bit through that experience and the work from the challenge that helped you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my youth activism journey really started in the classroom, just being encouraged by teachers to really share my voice and share my perspective, and started nonviolent protesting in the hallways of my school and just saying more love, less hate, our diversity is what makes us great. And from there, really was connected with community leaders who may not have been in public office, but knew that youth voice was what needed to be heard to change the city that I was in, which is Louisville, Kentucky. And from there, did some nonviolent protesting, specifically around the Breonna Taylor murder from LMPD, and that led to my arrest, but by just peacefully protesting. And so that journey of being empowered by teachers and community leaders in my city who understood that the youth were the ones who would be handed the torch eventually, and so we should empower them now to be able to understand how to leverage systems and to be able to advocate for themselves, then turned into being able to nonviolently protest, teach others how to nonviolently protest or to find their place within the movement. You may not always need to be on the front lines, but someone needs to, phone the bail line, someone needs to bake cookies, someone needs to hand out water bottles. And so creating youth empowerment and teaching youth how to have communities to be able to spread their voice was super important in that time.
That's amazing. So you're doing everything you can to make sure that your voice is heard, either through protesting, spoken word poetry, something that you're really that's a part of you. But just because you're heard doesn't mean you were listened to, right? At least it sounds like that was some of the kind of feedback we've heard in some of our previous discussions. What are some of the ways that you feel like are an opportunity just in that work to not just be heard and recognized for what we're saying, but to really put this into practice? How are you really listening to our needs?
Honestly, putting youth in the positions that you have, which means that you need to take a step back. And sometimes getting older, that's like, I want to, these are my opportunities, I've worked really hard. But youth are not going to be in any of these rooms without someone, a mentor, a teacher, a community activist, putting them there and realizing that they are such a large stakeholder with such a beautiful vision of what the future could look like and a torch that they need to take forward, that they need to be in those positions. So understanding where you need to step back, however uncomfortable that may be, and then putting youth in those places, as well as creating places for youth to have that voice and to create those platforms for themselves as well. So a balance of those two, I would say.
Amazing. So we today actually released some information that was data and a poll, and you as youth kind of leads in this work. I'd love to hear your perspective, against it or for it, just in terms of your own experience. So based on the results from the national poll we heard about this morning, it's clear that there is a lot of pessimism among Americans about the future of our country, especially for our kids and families. So just 22% of non-parent adult voters agreed with the idea that children today will be better off in adulthood than you are, right? So do you see this in kind of like your mindset in your own community, or how do you feel about personally? Anyone have a particular perspective? John? It's on the hand movement, so I figured, something right?
I feel like the future isn't gonna be what I would prefer it to be. Like it seems like our country in general is going into a place of like picking sides. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Everybody has subjective perspectives in which they're all wrapped up in, and everyone refuses to acknowledge the objective reality of things. So it's causing everybody to conflict because they can't see outside of their own subjective reality.
Yeah, for sure. Gianna or Ariana, any perspective?
I could also build on that. I feel like when it comes to pessimism and grief, I've very well resonated with that and sat with that. I remember being 15 years old and first learning about climate change out of luck, because I was really lucky to have an environmental science program at my school. Most students didn't, and 2% of my school took it. And I was really, really thankful for the educator that I had and the mentor that I had that gave me the space to become an organizer. And I remember being struck by that grief and that just frustration with the political inaction, with the debate. And it comes down to really being rooted in empathy and care. And I feel like that's a lot of what's missing in the conversation. And it's a matter of, I think, young people that find community in organizing and find a venue to really express that grief into action is the most powerful thing you can do with that pessimism. And that's what moves me from just being stagnant and losing myself to when thinking about the loss of my community, my family, my home. And so I think that's the most important thing, going back to your idea of giving young people the space to talk about these issues, address these issues, and inviting them to that room.
So something you said, and Ariana, I'm gonna add in another kind of piece of poll data here, but in addition to just having the classroom space to do it, it was built in, right? As we heard this morning across the board, when asked about how are we gonna improve the lives of children in America, people agree that solutions in education have the greatest potential for impact. Solutions in our education. Do you agree that education has the ability to improve our country? And if yes, is there something in your own experience with schools that has really made that kind of difference?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for our kids, they spend the most of their time at school. They're there 8 hours a day. And so the teachers and staff at school have a tremendous impact on our children, what they learn, what they teach, how they go about their daily lives going forward. I think the impact of education can never be understated. And so I think, oh, sorry, can you kind of repeat the end of that question?
Sure, sure. Is there something in your own experience with school that has really allowed for you to kind of make this difference in your own work?
Absolutely, the mentors. I think the mentor that I had throughout high school made the absolute difference. Not in terms of connecting me with different communities, being an advocate for me, putting me on different stages so different people could see me in my community and know
Yeah.
the work that we were doing, and just being so fiercely protective of the work that we're doing. And I think to go back to the point that my fellow Aspen Challenge participants have talked about. Children and youth right now are fighting for these issues out of necessity. I think that's a thing that we don't talk about enough. I mean, children are not naturally passionate about climate change, or not naturally passionate about these things. Often they just want to enjoy their lives and enjoy community. This call to action is because of the state of things, and
Yeah.
because they see a future that they do not necessarily want to exist in. And so understanding that our children are doing this to better the world that they're going to be living in, I think is tremendous for us to acknowledge, because they're not just doing this work because it's fun, they're doing
Yeah.
it so that they can build a better world. So being able to empower the voice for that reason, knowing that they're fighting for something that they will have to see through, I think also just gives a different perspective to the work, rather than just seeing children, protesting and doing all these things. We know that they're fighting for their own lives and for their own futures, and that's super important.
That's amazing. Fiercely protective. I mean, I think that was, I love that statement, especially as we think about, as we were just kind of stemming from, how can education help us? Sometimes education doesn't come in the sense of formal education in the classroom. So, Jonathan, I know you made a documentary about the promise and potential you see in the young people in New Orleans. What were you hoping to convey with it? And what do you want leaders in this room to know about your city's young people? And I'm particularly interested in, as an individual, I don't know many physicists or physics folks coming out of New Orleans, but that's a passion for you, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you think about this documentary you made about how do we just elevate the promise of our community, what did that do for you, and what do you hope to convey out of those types of experience? Excuse me, that experience for people here in this room to hear.
Well, with the documentary, I was basically just trying to convey that the youth are more than the narrative that's pushed in the media.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of the youth in New Orleans have broad interests that are not acknowledged, and they don't give you opportunities for said interest.
Yeah.
So like me, because I like physics, the closest program or anything to do with dealing with physics in New Orleans would be having to do with aerospace or engineering.
Mm-hmm.
But me, personally, I have an interest in quantum physics. There's not a lot of opportunities for quantum physics in New Orleans. So I feel like there should be more acknowledgement of those broad interests, like physics or chemicals, things like that, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think one of the things, as that's not a natural thing for oh yeah, we all just know about physics in my community in New Orleans. Yeah. Same with even climate change. We hear about it, but Gianna, you've been really focused on that as some of your work. What do you want leaders gathered here to know about your generation and your experience, especially as it relates to a topic like climate change and taking action against it?
I think, well, for me in my journey, it's been a lot of frustration. It's been a lot of rage channeled into community, into love, into work, honestly. And for me, some of the most meaningful things is having someone listen and then take action.
Yep.
Also, having worked in the nonprofit space with young people, investing money and without strings.
Yeah.
Just faith in that these community groups are making a difference, making a change. If you're not in the political space who could drive action, you could, if you're in the corporate space, you can donate money, and just really giving the resources to young people, may that be the mic, may that be the funding, may that be the political willpower, is so crucial, I think, in making a difference.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, invest in the direction that they plot, not invest in the direction you think they should be going in. Let them plot that way. So, Ariana, closing us out here. What would you like people here to take away from this conversation when they think about how to show up and really be here for your generation, and what young leaders like you will see as the challenges we all face? Like, how do you want us to kind of speak up and support you all?
I guess the message is, like she said, offer that support, whether that be creating third spaces for children and youth, whether that be elevating their voices, whether that be listening, whether that be advocating, whether that be offering them platforms. It's really just about letting them take the lead and letting them become change makers. And without a platform and without some resources, there's no way for them to do that. So it's up to us to provide that for them.
Amazing. So this is your table. This is your space. You all know where to find them. They will be here today. Thank you so much for your perspective. Enjoy the rest of today's conversations.